Well, what's up again there, guys? Brian here, D3 Topics Gamer, and I'm here to give you another episode of the People's Questions, where I answer a series of questions that have been sent to me over the past week. Today's episode, we got a pretty average episode. I did get a number of questions in the comment section of the last video, and I did answer them. Some of them, I think even one in particular, kind of repeated from last week's, I believe, so, and there's no need to answer a second time. But like always, if you could or haven't already, I would really appreciate it if you do like this video to give it a thumbs up, and do not forget to press the subscribe button, because every subscription does help us get us closer to our end of the year goal. And starting off with the first question coming from GOG, you want to know, have I watched the Clone Wars 2003 animated version, and if so, what did I think about it the most? Or technically, what did I like about it the most? It was just entertaining. You know, anything involving the Clone Wars era is pretty cool. And I think, overall, how it ended is pretty much how I expect this next season of animated Clone Wars to end. How it basically just kind of leads off into Revenge of the Sith. So, that's all I expect from it. But overall, it was entertaining. Next question comes from, well, we both know I've kind of given up on saying that first word, so I'll just call you Red Guilty. And you want to know, what characters do I want to come back from Resident Evil 8? I don't know. Look, as it stands right now, from what I've heard, it's going to follow the Resident Evil 7 first-person point of view. So, I'm not going to play it. So, I could care less who's in it. So, I don't care. I've heard people say it's going to be Chris, or Chris is going to be the bad guy, or this Ethan character who I don't know who, and someone said he was from 7, but I don't know who that is, and some say it's going to have werewolves and witches, and, you know, like, I've said this before, we've seen crazier things. If they start adding all these, I'm surprised we haven't had aliens yet. But heck, if aliens were to pop out from outer space, I would not be surprised. And I think there was, like, an addition to that question saying, like, in future installments, at this point, I would really appreciate if they just retired the old characters and give us some new ones. I really thought they had a good opportunity with Resident Evil 6. It would have been a great time to retire Chris, Leon, and Ada, and let Piers, let Jake and Sherry keep going, and heck, even in some sense, let Helena continue going. I'm at this point, these characters have been around. Think about it. These characters have been around since the 90s. I think it's time we retire them and add a new set of characters for another generation. So, but that's just how I feel about it. Next question comes from Brady Burke. You want to know, can the Star Wars sequel trilogy be remade? Why would you want to remake them at this point? If you remake them, what is the point? At this point, I don't think that the originals needed a sequel. I never once believed that. And heck, when you do that, you're just opening the floodgates for a whole bunch of different things. It's like, well, if you remake the sequels, you gotta remake the originals. Heck, and if you remake the originals, you gotta remake the prequels. And then it's like, is anything concrete? Or are we just gonna get to a point where if you don't like something, we have to remake it? Like, at this point, Disney can do whatever the hell they want. Just, I don't care anymore. I genuinely do not care. The sequel trilogy is out. What is the point of remaking them? I heard like a rant. Someone feel this way about like the last season of Game of Thrones. They said it was trash, and it's like there was this stupid petition online saying they want them to remake the last season of Game of Thrones. I never watched Game of Thrones, but I'm like, look, it's already out. It's there. You take it or leave it. That's how I feel about it. I'm not a fan of the sequel trilogy, but I know that there's a group that are. And heck, if you remake it, you're going to piss off those people. And then, it's just not worth it at this point. If you do that, you're going to open a whole new set of problems that we just do not need. And heck, we are now at a point where there is potential that Star Wars could be moving in a positive direction now that Disney is done with the sequel trilogy. We're like, let's just forget about all of that and focus on moving forward. And the last question of the episode comes from Trooper XD Extreme, and you want to know, oh dear lord, do I think that Resident Evil 4 will be remade after Resident Evil 3? I hope to God not. Resident Evil 4 does not enough of these fucking remakes and remasterings. And why would you want to remake something that is perfectly fine the way it is? Resident Evil 4 was it not only is the best installment in Resident Evil, it single-handedly created a new genre of gaming in survival horror and completely revolutionized an entirely new type of gameplay that is still being used to this day. I mean, honestly, for every time Resident Evil 4 gets re-released for a new console, it always sells millions of copies. Every single time. And this is a PS2 game or GameCube game if you go back far enough. It does not need a remake. If anything, if they're going to remake anything after Resident Evil 3, I see them remaking Code Veronica. I do not want to see a remake to Resident Evil 4. It is quite literally a perfect game. I don't care if the game would look great. The game already looks good in the condition it's in. And then if you start doing that, how far forward do we have to go until we start remaking games that already look good? I mean, 20 years from now, are we going to start remaking the Uncharted games? Or PlayStation 3 games and PlayStation 4 games? I mean, when do we just say, listen, the game still looks good, even for its time? Dude, there are some PlayStation 2 games that still look good for their time, and they don't need to be remade. It's just, there's got to be limits here. I could understand if you want to remake a 16-bit game, or a game that was so far ahead of its time that the graphics just could not support. So that's why I'm not against them wanting to remake something like 7 or 8 or 9. The PlayStation 2 era, or technically PlayStation 1 era, was a very, very crucial time, but the graphics just could not quite get there. And the game, if you look back at them, they haven't quite aged very well. So I can understand remaking those games. But something like Resident Evil 2, the PlayStation 2 era, during that whole period of time, games were looking pretty damn good. And they still look pretty good to this day. They just need a little bit of HD remastering, and heck, you can re-release them. And that's exactly what Capcom does every single generation. So no, I really hope they do not ever remake Resident Evil 4. It does not need it. And if anything, if they want to make another remake after Resident Evil 3, you're better off going with Code Veronica. Or even better, why not do a remake for Resident Evil 1 and do it in the style that they've done the current remakes? Do it in that style, because they re-release Resident Evil 1, but it was basically just the same game, but just with better graphics. Actually remake do the whole thing. Do it in that style. That's what I'd like to see. And with that, those are pretty much all the questions that were sent to me that made it into the video for this episode. I'd like to thank everyone for sending your questions that I answered in this video, as well as in the comment section of the last video. If you guys have any more questions you'd like me to answer in next week's episode, be sure to type them right down below. And do not forget, as I said at the very beginning, to give this video a thumbs up if you happen to like it. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I will see you next week.